The graveyard was silent under the evening sky when a little boy knelt before his mother's tombstone, his small hands trembling. With tears streaming down, he whispered, "She's still alive. Please, someone believe me." People walking. By thought, grief had clouded his mind, until a passing millionaire stopped, struck by the boy's desperate plea. What followed shook the entire town and uncovered a truth buried deeper than the grave itself. The cemetery lay draped in silence, the kind of silence that pressed on the heart heavier than the gravestones scattered across the land. The evening sun was fading, spilling streaks of crimson and gold across the horizon. Amid the shadows, a small figure knelt before a weathered stone. His name was Ethan, only 7 years old, yet carrying a grief far heavier than any child should. His clothes were faded and torn, his shoes too small, and his face smudged with dirt. But his eyes, large, brown, and wet with tears, were fixed on one name carved into the stone. It was his mother's. The world said she was gone forever, claimed by a sudden car accident, buried beneath the earth like a closed chapter. Yet Ethan refused to believe it. Every day after school, while other children played or ran home to warm meals, Ethan came here. He sat on the cold ground, whispering to the grave as though it were alive. That evening, his whispers turned into sobs. His small fists pounded the ground softly, his voice cracking with each word. "Mama, I know you can hear me. You're not dead. You're just sleeping. Please wake up. Please." Passers-by glanced his way, some with pity, others with annoyance. A few muttered under their breath about how grief had stolen the boy's reason. "Poor child," one woman whispered to her friend. "He hasn't accepted reality. It's heartbreaking, but he'll learn with time." They moved on, leaving the boy alone with his cries. But Ethan's conviction was stronger than their doubts. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand and leaned closer to the grave. "Last night I heard you, Mama," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You knocked from inside. I felt it. I heard your voice calling me. Please don't give up. I'll save you. I promise." The words were filled with such certainty that even the rustling trees seemed to pause. His tears dripped onto the soil, as if watering the hope that refused to die in his heart. It was then that fate intervened. At the far side of the cemetery, a tall man in a dark suit walked slowly along the gravel path. His hair was streaked with gray, his posture sharp, but his eyes carried the weight of sorrow. His name was Raymond Cole, a millionaire known for his business empire and his icy demeanor. He rarely spoke to strangers, never wasted time on what he considered nonsense. But today was different. He had come to visit the grave of his wife, taken by illness years ago. Each visit was a routine, a flower placed, a few silent minutes, then back to the car. Yet something about the boy's desperate cries pierced the silence. Raymond stopped in his tracks. He turned, following the sound, and soon spotted Ethan kneeling before the stone. For a moment, he hesitated. His instinct was to leave. This wasn't his problem. But as he watched, he felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years. The boy's trembling shoulders, the raw ache in his voice, it reminded Raymond of himself the day he had buried his wife. The pain of helplessness, the longing for one more moment. Against his usual cold nature, Raymond walked closer. His polished shoes crunched against the gravel, and Ethan looked up, startled. His face was streaked with dirt and tears, but his eyes burned with an intensity that froze Raymond mid-step. "Why do you say she's alive?" Raymond asked softly, his voice unusually gentle. Ethan sniffled, wiped his nose with his sleeve, and answered with unwavering conviction. "Because I can feel her. She's not gone. Last night she called my name. I heard her knocking. Please, sir, you have to believe me." Raymond's breath caught. His logical mind told him this was impossible, that grief had twisted the boy's thoughts. And yet, there was something in Ethan's eyes, a glimmer of truth or faith so strong it unsettled him. The millionaire crouched down, leveling his gaze with the boy's. "What if you're wrong, son?" he asked carefully. "I'm not wrong," Ethan shouted. his small voice echoing in the quiet graveyard. His chest heaved with sobs. No, one believes me. They all think I'm crazy, but I know my mama is alive. Please, sir, help me. You're the only one listening. Those words sank deep into Raymond's heart. He felt the walls of ice around his soul crack just a little. For the first time in years, he didn't see himself as a powerful man, but simply as someone who knew the sting of loss, and somehow, against all reason, he couldn't walk away. The boy clung to his sleeve, looking up at him with pleading eyes. And Raymond, though he didn't understand why, whispered the words that would change everything. All right, Ethan, I'll stay. Let's see if you're right. The sky had turned a deep indigo, stars barely peeking through the velvet canvas. The cemetery was no place to linger at night, but Raymond Cole, the millionaire who once lived by his watch and his schedules, found himself rooted to the spot. He couldn't leave the boy, not after what he had just witnessed in Ethan's eyes. The boy's grip on his sleeve was iron tight. Please, sir, please don't go. She's calling me again. Can't you hear her? Raymond shook his head. Slowly, his rational mind screaming at him to walk away. And yet, in the quiet, he caught the faintest sensation, a vibration beneath his feet, or maybe it was his imagination. His chest tightened. He couldn't ignore this child. Something about his faith stirred a strange unease in him. Stay here, Raymond said firmly. He pulled out his phone and called his chauffeur. Bring lanterns, shovels, and some men from the estate, immediately. Within half an hour, the millionaire's sleek black car pulled up at the edge of the cemetery. Out stepped two men in uniforms carrying tools, confused but obedient. Raymond's reputation was enough that none of them dared question him. Start digging here, he commanded, pointing to the grave where Ethan's small hands rested. The workers exchanged uncertain glances. One finally spoke, his voice low. Sir, forgive me, but this isn't right. Disturbing the dead, it's... Do as I say, Raymond snapped, his usual authority returning. But his eyes softened as he looked at Ethan. If the boy is wrong, we'll know soon enough. If he's right... He didn't finish the sentence, but the weight of his words was heavy in the night air. Word spread quickly through the town. Lanterns glowing in the distance drew curious villagers who arrived whispering among themselves. Some were horrified, some amused, and some prayed quietly under their breath. Foolishness, muttered an old man. The rich man has gone mad, listening to a child's fantasy. But Ethan stood tall, fists clenched, eyes never leaving the soil being shoveled away. He wasn't afraid of their laughter. His heart pounded with hope. She's in there, you'll see, he whispered. The digging went on. Every strike of the shovel into the dirt echoed in the night like a drumbeat of destiny. Sweat trickled down the workers' foreheads. The smell of damp earth rose as the pit deepened. Then, suddenly, one of the men froze. His shovel hung mid-air, his face drained of color. Sir, he said hoarsely, listen. The group fell silent. For a moment, all they heard was the wind rustling through the trees. Then it came, a faint, muffled sound, a dull thud, then another, rhythmic, human. Gasps erupted. Some villagers crossed themselves, others backed away in fear. Ethan's eyes went wide with triumph. He turned to Raymond, his voice breaking with desperation and joy. I told you, it's Mama. She's calling me. Raymond's heart hammered in his chest. Logic screamed at him to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, the shifting soil, or an echo. But the sound came again, clearer this time. A frantic knock. He staggered back a step, his hand pressing to his chest. For years he had lived in shadows, cold and calculated, but in that moment he felt alive. Terrified, yes, but alive. Faster! He barked at the workers, his voice trembling with urgency. Get her out! Now! The men redoubled their efforts, shovels striking the earth with furious determination. The crowd pressed closer, their skepticism melting into awe and fear. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the weight of the impossible. Ethan clung to Raymond's arm, his little body shaking with anticipation. His lips moved silently, a prayer escaping with each breath. Please, Mama, please hold on. Finally, after what felt like hours, the shovel hit wood. The hollow sound sent shivers racing through every spine present. The coffin was unearthed. Dust and roots clung to its surface, but it was intact. Raymond's throat tightened as he stepped forward. His trembling hand rested on the lid. "Open it," he whispered. The workers exchanged horrified glances. No one wanted to be the first, but Raymond's gaze brooked no refusal. With crowbars and trembling hands, they pried it open. The lid creaked, the sound piercing the night. The crowd leaned forward, breaths held, eyes wide. Ethan squeezed Raymond's hand, his knuckles white, and then the impossible revealed itself. Inside lay a woman. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked, her fingers bloodied from scratching the wood. Yet her chest rose and fell faintly. Her eyes fluttered, struggling to open. A weak gasp escaped her lips. She was alive. A cry tore from Ethan's throat, raw and filled with joy. "Mama!" He lunged forward, falling into the coffin, wrapping his small arms around her fragile frame. The villagers erupted, some with screams of terror, others with cries of awe. The priest who had come to see fell to his knees, whispering prayers. Raymond stood frozen, his eyes wet. For the first time in years, the cold fortress around his heart shattered completely. He had just witnessed a miracle. The night air carried a chill, but no one in the crowd felt it. Hearts pounded, breaths caught, and eyes refused to blink. They had just witnessed the impossible. The dead had come back to life. The woman inside the coffin, pale and trembling, was Ethan's mother, Anna. She clung weakly to her son's tiny frame, her lips moving, whispering his name, Ethan. The word slipped from her cracked lips like a fragile prayer. Ethan sobbed into her chest, shaking uncontrollably. "I knew it. I told them you were alive. I never stopped believing, Mama." His tears soaked into her torn dress, his little fingers digging into her hand as though afraid she'd vanish again. The villagers who had gathered around stood frozen, their skepticism crumbling into shame. Some wiped tears, others fell silent, struck dumb by the scene. One elderly woman whispered, "The boy was right all along. His love saved her." Doctors were called immediately. A van arrived carrying a team who rushed to the site, lifting Anna carefully from the coffin. They checked her pulse, her breathing, her frail condition. "It's incredible," one doctor murmured. "She was buried alive. Some kind of cataleptic state. Rare, but it happens. If not for the boy." He trailed off, shaking his head. Unable to finish the thought, Ethan refused to let go of his mother's hand as they placed her on a stretcher. His small face glowed with determination, even in exhaustion. "I'm not leaving her," he declared firmly, his voice trembling but strong. Raymond followed closely, his chest still heaving from shock. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, now shone with something unfamiliar, compassion. Watching the boy clutch his mother with such raw love awakened memories of his own wife's final moments. He remembered sitting helplessly by her hospital bed, wishing for just one more breath, one more chance. But unlike him, Ethan had been given that miracle. The hospital became their second home in the days that followed. Anna remained weak, but alive, slowly recovering strength under medical care. The doctors marveled at her survival. "It's nothing short of a miracle," they repeated, shaking their heads in disbelief. Through it all, Raymond stayed. He didn't know why at first. Maybe it was guilt for all the times he had ignored others in pain. Maybe it was Ethan's eyes, those innocent eyes that reminded him of a younger, purer version of himself. Or maybe it was Anna's whispered gratitude, even when her voice barely carried. "Thank you," she told him one evening, her hand trembling as it reached for his. "If you hadn't believed him, if you hadn't listened, I would still be buried under the earth." Raymond swallowed hard, his throat tight. For years he had believed money could solve everything, that wealth was power. Yet here he stood, realizing that true power was something different: the courage of a child, the hope of love, and the miracle of faith. Ethan never left his mother's side. Every morning he woke up curled in a chair next to her bed, and every night he fell asleep, with his fingers wrapped around hers. His devotion humbled everyone who witnessed it. Nurses often stopped to watch, their eyes misty, whispering, "That boy saved her life." Weeks passed, and Anna grew stronger. The color returned to her cheeks, her voice steadied, and one morning she stood for the first time. The hospital staff clapped softly, Ethan cried openly, and Raymond smiled, an expression that looked foreign on his usually hardened face. The miracle changed not just Ethan's life, but Raymond's too. For years he had lived alone in his mansion, his wealth an empty fortress. But now he found himself drawn to Ethan and Anna, visiting them daily, bringing food, arranging the best care, and sitting quietly by their side. Slowly, their presence healed wounds he thought would never close. The town, too, changed. People who once mocked Ethan now looked at him with reverence. "We doubted him," they admitted, "but he showed us the strength of pure love." One evening, as the sun dipped low, Raymond stood outside the hospital with Ethan and Anna. The golden light bathed them in warmth, and for a moment the world felt whole. Ethan slipped his small hand into Raymond's and looked up at him. "You believed me when no one else did," the boy said softly. "You saved my mama with me. You're part of our family now." The words struck Raymond like a lightning bolt, gentle yet shattering. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years, he allowed tears to roll freely down his cheeks. He knelt before Ethan, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "No, Ethan," he whispered. "It was you. Your love saved her. You reminded me what it means to believe in something greater than myself. You saved me too." Anna, standing behind them, placed her hand on both their shoulders. In that moment, 3 broken lives, an orphaned boy, a buried mother, and a lonely millionaire, were bound together, not by blood, but by love and fate. The story spread far beyond their small town, inspiring people everywhere. It wasn't just a tale of survival. It was proof that hope, no matter how impossible, could move mountains and even open graves. As the night fell, Ethan lay between his mother and Raymond, holding both their hands. His final words before drifting into sleep carried into the quiet. "See, Mama? I told them you were alive. I never stopped believing." And in that moment, under the stars, the impossible had not only been proven true, it had healed hearts, restored faith, and created a family out of loss. The end wasn't sorrow. It was a beginning, strong, miraculous, unforgettable.